Hello, my friends. Welcome to August. This month is going to be all about the idea of desire. Where does it come from? What does it mean? This idea that desire is a signal of the body's place as a sacred vessel, a sacred animal, a sacred beast that we are gifted with in this incarnation. The conversation this month is going to be about honoring the movement up, honoring the movements up from the earth, from our bodies, from our longing, from our hearts, from the belly of our desire, as equally as we honor the spiritual drop down, the spiritual on high kind of energy that we imagine comes from, air quotes, above. The idea of how these two things wind together to create our fullness, to create this miracle of existence that is being a human. There's something really interesting in this moment where things like AI, things like aliens are coming into the conversation. This idea of a disembodied consciousness, the fact that there will be consciousness that we relate to and deal with and learn from that does not exist in a body. What does that mean about our bodies? What does it mean about the fact that part of the miracle, the sacredness, the divinity that is being human exists in a body, exists through a body? There's something so beautiful about understanding the purity and the innocence of our desires. So listen, this might be a confronting month. There are questions about obsession, there's questions about addiction, there's questions about the way that desire itself is so pure and innocent, and yet the behaviors that we engage to try to meet those desires can often be sticky and messy and harmful. I'm so curious as to what this is going to look like. It's very sexy energy. I have a feeling that August is going to be a very sexy month. It's going to be a very embodied month, whatever that means to you. There are going to be things coming up around your body, around the fullness of living here on earth, in gravity, in the world, with desires and needs. We have these needy bodies, and it drives so much of our behavior, and that is going to be coming front and center in the month ahead. We will talk about how important it's going to be to say no this month, to say no from a place of knowing what we want and creating space for it to arrive. I will have a separate podcast up for the monthly card pulls that will drop tomorrow, and I'd love to hear how your August goes. And all I'll say is there's a sweetness and a sexiness and a, kind of carnal yesness to this month, and I cannot wait to hear what it's like for you. I cannot wait to experience it myself, and I just feel like a deep bow of devotion to the fact that I get to be in a body and live in this world for the month ahead. Wishing you so much luck as you navigate this beautiful green wild world with your crazy, wild, hungry lion of desires. What follows is a discussion of that through the lens of the Strength card and the Devil card, and we're going to get into it. So let's do it. Bye. Okay, my sexy creatures, welcome to August. Welcome to the It's Giving Mystical monthly energy reading and numerology report and energy forecast and yada, yada, yada. It's me, Kirsten, and I'm so happy to be here with you. This is such cool energy. I know I say that every time, but it's true. All the energy is cool. It's so beautiful to feel into the different ribbons and threads and colors that is life, and to feel it. I know these cards so well, and I know what the numerology looks like for the year ahead. I can tell you each month and what the 7-year does to the energy and the cards that we'll be looking at. And yet, when I sit down to look at these two cards side by side, and I give myself the space to feel into the depth and the river and the story that is emerging in our lives, I'm always blown away. And this month is no exception. I should know better. But our cards for this month are Strength, number 8, which is, we're going to talk about that, which is always the energy of August, and the Devil, which is the 7-year plus the 8-month, add up to 15, which gives us Devil energy. There is so much to say about both of these things. Do not make assumptions about what this means. And also, we would be silly not to mention that both of these cards are primarily focused on desire. Primarily focused on the human, earthly, sexy, body-focused parts of living. That is what these cards identify with. That is what they are speaking to. And the fact that they're both showing up this month together is just juicy. That is the only word for it. It's a little kinky, it's a little juicy, and it's definitely a little turned on excitement. Let's just get into it. One of the things I wanted to say right off the bat is that there is a key phrase that goes with the Chariot card. It's called the Victory card. And there's a Victory card in the Minor Arcana, but the Victory card of the Major Arcana is the Chariot. That's kind of like Tarot 101, and it's something that I would almost always mention, and for some reason, last month I didn't, and I've been thinking about it. I re-listened to the July forecast, and I've just been thinking about it, and I'm like, God, it's so interesting that all of this other stuff would come through, and yet you wouldn't offer to yourself and to the world that we don't do this sacred mystery work without reason. And for the Chariot and for the Temperance card to come side by side is such a double high five of victory. So I just want to say to you, whatever you have endured in this past month, whatever you have lived through or celebrated, or I don't know, like in any way, shape, or form, it's been your lived experience. It is leading you towards victory. And I just really want to put that into our field and into our vocabulary around July and what happened and where we were and whatever we were processing and working through. Because it was a slippery little time. It was confusing and also so clarifying. It was so beautiful to witness some of the people I work with, some people I've studied with for years, watch them regather these nuggets of information that maybe they've always known or maybe they've always traveled with, but they were kind of like, oh, wait, this is the thing. And this kind of integration, this refolding into their bodies, these key essences, these key parts of who they are and what their magic and their medicine is. That's alchemy. That's so beautiful. And it's definitely not something that's happening on the mental plane. In my own life, I can tell you, I'm not done processing yet. My brain definitely hasn't caught up to what happened. But there was some really interesting detours and really interesting awareness that came up. And what I thought July was going to be and what ended up being were very, very different. And I would, even though some parts of it were challenging, I wouldn't trade it for a second. I'm really grateful for the mystery that the world took me on, the trip that the world took me on through that month. So I hope that was also a little bit of your experience. I would love to hear about it always, what it was like for you. And I encourage you to spend some time before you kind of lean into August, spend some time sitting with July and being grateful for whatever was in whatever way feels good to you. I think it's important. You know, I say this a lot, but I mean it. It's something that a bunch of my teachers have taught me, but that the quality of our endings determines the quality of our beginnings. And there was something that came home to rest, to be, to live in our bodies and our fields in July that I think it would be great if we said thank you for and kind of bowed, made completion with whatever that journey looked like for us. I hope that makes sense. On to the sexy time that is August of 2023. Okay, number 8, the Strength card. August is always the Strength card, and the Strength card is a beautiful image. When I was little, this was far and above my favorite card, little Scorpio baby that I was. I love this image. I always have. It is a lovely creature, human, dressed in white with a belt of roses, and they have their hands on this lion, this beautiful lion whose mouth is open, their tongue is out, and the person has their hands in, usually it's described as a maiden, has their hands in the lion's mouth. And there's this supreme gentleness about her and this patience and calmness and contradictory energy, because you think if you had your hands in the mouth of a lion, you might be a little more tense, and she's very, very relaxed. The infinity circles her, is above her head, the way that it is in the Magician. Strength card number 8 is so important because, as I mentioned in some of the other monthly readings, we really do lay out the cards in these 3 rows of 7. And the Magician is the first of the first line, and Strength is the first of the second line, and the Devil is the first of the third line. So I want you to think about these 3 cards, Magician, Strength, Devil, and begin to feel into what they might have in common. What might be this trajectory? What might we be learning about being human, about being ourselves, by kind of following these as these 3 important kickoff points. There is a lot of controversy about the 8 because in the original tarot decks, Strength, or in some decks it's called Lust actually, was considered number 11. And at some point, I think it was Ryder who, when they did their deck, change them. And there's a lot of talk about mystery schools, and a lot of talk about initiation, and how some people get the secret society reasons why the 8 and 11 are switched and some people don't. And what do you think? Do you think that strength is an 8 or strength is an 11? But number 8 is, in my mind, strength. It always has been. It's the way I learned to read tarot, and it feels like a great connection to me. The infinity symbol above the magician's head and the infinity symbol above the strength, the maiden and the strength card, have always really spoken to me. The magician is as above, so below. It is pure manifestation. It is the idea that I can plug into spirit, and everything that is perceived in the spiritual, everything that is imagined, will come to form in the real world. The strength card is a very different way of dealing with earthly energy. It's actually trusting the drive from the ground up. It's trusting the drive from the earth up and from the body up. It's trusting our desire. It is trusting our desire. And it's trusting our ability at this point in our journey through the major arcana to be with our desires in a way that is purifying, that is beautiful, that is enlightening, that is vivifying, like brings energy and life to our bodies. That we begin to understand that the spiritual life is not something that's happening outside of us, that is not something that's happening in the ethers. It is something that is happening in this incarnation, in this human body. This is a really interesting idea anytime. It's a particularly interesting idea right now with the conversations around AI and the questions around humanity and the questions around where we are evolving to. I don't know if your women's circles are like my women's circles, but there's a lot of conversation around AI and a lot of conversation around aliens and angels and ancestors, and how are they different and how are they the same, and what does it even matter, and what are we labeling what. I was fascinated by those alien hearings. Not that I really watched them. I kind of watched like little TikTok clips of them because I actually felt like they were so weird. Something about them felt creepy to me in the way that, like the way a Twilight Zone show would be creepy. Have you ever seen like the old Twilight Zones and you're watching them and it'll be something that looks really normal and really wholesome, and then there'll just be like one little tilt that will happen, and all of a sudden it's what was like normal and wholesome becomes deeply disturbing and creepy. That's kind of the energy I got from those hearings. Not that anything wrong, and not that they said anything that I'm frankly surprised about, but something felt performative about it, or obviously felt like theatrical, felt like it was, just this performance of alien knowledge that felt very scripted and bizarre to me. So I didn't watch it for that reason, because it kind of left me with this feeling of creepy, like kind of icky. Not because of the aliens, yay aliens, like I'm not surprised or anything at all. My one question, which I'm so interested in, is if they say the aliens look like us and that they're walking around among us, do they know they're aliens? Or like, could you and I be aliens and not know? Because that feels to me more accurate. Like with the work I've done on the Akasha and what I've seen about how people journey here and how people incarnate and what their soul's experience of being in a human body feels like and looks like, my ability to witness that with other people, one of the blessings of my work, is fascinating to me. Because what I've said, and I don't know if I've said this here before, is that one of the gifts of that is for me when I go into the Akasha with someone, sometimes I've really been blown away because my soul only knows what my soul knows. And I've been in the Akasha with other people, with their guardians and ancestors and guides and souls, higher selves. And I've seen an evolution and an experience of living that is very foreign to what we know here on earth and very foreign to what my soul has experienced. And what I've realized is that on this earth, in this earth school, there are many different types of people coming to play, many different types of energies coming to play. And where my soul has journeyed from across time and space is not necessarily where your soul has journeyed from across time and space. And so my point is, who's to say who the aliens are? Do the aliens know they're aliens? Or is it like being human where you have this total plan and you hurt, like being a soul that comes in with a total plan, gets dropped into a body, and all of a sudden you forget everything. We come with the soul family and we're like, you guys, we have this plan for what we're going to do in this incarnation, and you and I are going to get in this fight, and you and I are going to trigger each other this way, and you and I are going to love each other this way. And then we forget it all, right? And we play it out. Is that also happening for the aliens? My guess, which based on nothing except maybe my own experiences of spirit, are that, like, I think that might be what's happening. It's possible that that there are aliens among us, but not in this like nefarious, like, oh no, man, aliens among us, watch out. But more in this way of, yeah, of course there are. Of course there are interdimensional beings incarnate as humans. Yes, that's to say all about that. Meaning that this strength card, this idea of human desires, this idea of carnal desire, this idea of your body's needs and wants and yearnings, and think about those as, if we could think about those as spiritual urges, spiritual yearnings, spiritual movements, that all of a sudden that takes on a very different feeling. All of a sudden that's not something that is like, oh, you're so crazy and human and so far from God, so far from spirit. It's like, no, actually, this is exactly what I'm doing. I am a spirit that came maybe down, those are air quotes, down from above, but I'm a spirit who is meant to live up from the body. Does that make sense? It's super interesting to me. August, the 8th month, it's always a sexy time, right? Who doesn't think August is a sexy month? Leos, where are my Leos at? It's such, and Virgos, you know, you guys act a little shy, but we know. So it's this very sexy energy. Where we are, it's the heat of summer, it's beach time, it's vacation time. In Europe, it's often like holiday time. So it has this kind of luxurious, sensual, erotic energy to it. That is just the energy with us this month. I will say on a higher level, on a higher perspective or something to work with, is this idea of how do you feel about your desires? And it's interesting, right? Because I can say that to you and most of you are probably like, I feel good, I'm allowed to want what I want. But we're not always clear on our desires. The things that we deeply, deeply desire can sometimes be can feel a little dangerous to us, can feel a little overwhelming to us. And there's this interesting idea of how do you work with the things you desire? Do you trust that? And I really want you to feel what I just said before, like, what if you're meant to live here from the ground up, from your body up, from your desires up, from your root up? What if you're meant to take this kundalini, this snake, and rise it up? There's something about that I think is relevant and important in this moment in our evolution. It's always been important for humans, but this is the conversation we're going to be rolling into as AI and this idea of disembodied consciousness becomes something much more far-reaching, becomes something we're dealing with on a daily basis. The idea of being an embodied being, having embodied consciousness, is going to change everything. That's going to be the mark. That's going to be the conversation. I just read one of the AI guys has a new currency, and the only thing you need to do to get the currency is let them scan your eyeballs to see if you're human. I mean, I think there's like ethical issues there. I'm not really sure how I feel about it, but it's interesting that he's saying you can have this money if you're human. What does that mean? It's like a whole interesting wormhole that we probably will slide into. But this conversation around your desires takes on a new urgency, takes on a new importance. When you're thinking about, we kind of took for granted, right? We're in bodies. That's what you do here. You just come here. You're in a body. You eat, you sleep. You want to have sex all the time. Like, you just thought that's what the story was. But if in this moment of evolution, all of a sudden there's consciousness floating around that's not embodied, and somehow we need to navigate that world, what does being an embodied being begin to reveal about itself? What importance does it take on? What new perspective do you feel into when you realize that? Number 8. 8 is infinity. It is a very feminine energy. In a lot of esoteric writings, they'll talk about 7 as the number of the masculine magic, because there's 7 points on a male body. And 8 is the number of feminine magic because there are 8 points on a woman's body. Or maybe it's holes, sorry, it might be points and holes. Thank you, that sounded so crude. I think it's something like that. That's a very gender-based conversation, so we might want to move beyond that. But just to kind of give the history of that 7 and that 8 energy. We just came out of the 7th month, the 7 chariot energy, where we were talking about drawing our will, drawing our desires, drawing ourselves into focus, drawing ourselves into fullness. If you keep drawing in, and you never express, you never emote, you never desire out from that place, it can get awfully cold and awfully lonely in there really fast. So the 8 comes in, the strength comes in to balance that. Yes, I am the master of my domain. Yes, I have pulled in my energy. And yet I'm still kind of hungry and messy and sexy. And that's cool. That's what we're here to work with in this 8 energy. When I was younger, my mom would describe this card to me. She would say it's this idea of gentleness, this idea of harnessing our desires with a profound gentleness. And yes, that's true. The idea of harnessing this wild beast with a chain of roses. That's the image. That's really one of the key images of the strength card. Harnessing the wild beast with a chain of roses. How scary are your desires? How gently do you hold them? How much do you kind of devote an awe or a sense of devotion or a sense of worthiness to them? That's kind of some of the questions that we're beginning to ask. So the other thing to say about this strength energy is, how does strength relate to power? And that goes into this idea of this chain of roses. It goes into this wild beast. It's such a beautiful card. I love it so much. And so this 8, this infinity, there's just a sense of openness, a sense of innocence. I think that's one of the things I've always loved about this card. There's a sense of innocence. If you held your body, you held living in a body with no sense of shame, with no sense of conceit, because those are really the same thing, right? Shame and conceit are two sides, same coin. They're an idea of self-awareness, self-consciousness. Like, I'm not in myself, I am watching myself, I am perceiving myself. There's this deep innocence in the strength card. It's such a beautiful thing. This idea that if you could just be in your body and want what you want without any consciousness, without any confusion. So when I'm hungry, I just reach for food, and I reach for foods that feel good, and I know when I'm full because I feel full and satisfied, and I drink when I need to, and I reach for touch when I need to, and I soothe my body. I touch my own body when I need to. I am out in the world when I need to. I smell the flowers when I need to. I work and strain my body when I need to. Like, this just sense of like, whatever emerges as something I need or want, for there to it to move through the channel, the container, the body in such a way that feels uninhibited and feels so pure, feels so without taint, without constriction, but without corruption. That would be a better word for that. Strength really is this idea of being so open. There's no modesty, there's no shame. You are just enjoying your animal. I wonder how that lands for you. I wonder where in your life that might be coming up, or there might be an edge in that for you, because that is going to be more pronounced in this month of August. The other card that's with us in this month of August is the Devil. Okay, so I just talked about corruption, right? The Devil is number 15, and we talked about this back in June and I think the Devil actually came up for us too, because the Devil is this, speaking about two sides of one coin, is the other side of the Lovers. The Devil is such, I almost said it's such interesting energy again, but I always say that, so I'm going to try to stop saying that. But it is really interesting energy. The Devil is such a corrupted understanding period. The energy of the horned god, the horned one, actually comes from esoteric, old, ancient practices of male sexuality. So of the bacchanalia of Pan, this energy of the wild masculine force, the wild chasing goat man, like hungry with desire and libido and hunger. I mean, on all the different levels, right? And that became something that was frowned upon, the same way that women were branded witches. There's this idea of a man enjoying and loving and celebrating his sexuality and his desire became something that was wrapped in shame, soaked in shame, and has resulted in a world we live in now where there's so much danger around male sexuality, so much harm around male sexuality, unfortunately. The essence that is within the Devil is that Pan energy, and it's nothing to be ashamed of. Again, these two cards, this reflects back to what I was saying about the female essence that's in the Strength card, the female sexuality that's in the Strength card. The male sexuality, we want to think about what would these things be like from a place of innocence. The Devil is asking us to, again, feel into this energy of, what if I'm here on earth on purpose? What if my body, with its desires, with its hungers, is actually just right on time? And it's so interesting. If you have a deck, put these cards side by side and just feel into them. Feel what is similar, feel what is different. There's this idea of curly hair, this idea of that also associated with Kundalini energy, right? The curly hair of the goat, the curly hair of the lion, this energy of the snake. The snake in shamanic medicine is the energy of what is. And that can sound so basic, but I find the snake in shamanic medicine super helpful, because my tendency is to make connections, right? My tendency is to say, well, what does it mean? Or what does it reveal? Or what does it show me? Or what do I connect it to? And the snake says, no, it just is. It just is. And I invite you, next time you're struggling with something, or you're trying to analyze something, or you're confused about something, invite in serpent energy, call in Sachamama and say, hey, serpent, can you be with me in this? Can I see this from your perspective? And the lens will shift, and all of a sudden you're just perceiving what is, without judgment, without meaning, without stepping ahead or back. It's like, no, this just is. And for me, in my own psychology, my own development, my own needs, that can be deeply soothing. I can find a lot of peace in the fact of, wait, no, this just is. And there's something about both the lion and the devil that just say this is, these things are. And how much energy are we spending pretending they're not, trying to smush them into some container that we then deem worthy or okay. And I'll say that the corruption of the devil energy, the corruption around the devil energy, often has to do with the binding of it. And we talked about this when we talked about the devil card, right? The binding of it. It's not the energy, it's not the desire, it's not the impulse, it's not the core intention, the core need that causes us trouble. It's the behaviors around it. It's the things that we do to try to achieve it that we can be so harmful. We can be so harmful. The devil card is also associated with addiction. One of my favorite definitions of addiction is it's the narrowing of what brings you pleasure. We have all had that experience. You don't need to identify as an addict or as a recovering addict to understand that feeling of the narrowing of what brings you pleasure. We have all been there. We have all been in a place of obsession or a place of feeding something inside of us that we feel like we can only get relief from this one thing or this one place or this one person or this one activity. That can take all shapes, right? That can be a substance, it could be your phone, it could be your work, it could be your relationships, it could be literally a million things. But it's this narrowing of what brings you pleasure. That in a month where the devil is coming to be with us, that is also going to come up. The devil in the traditional tarot signifies this alchemical process of taking a base material and making it pure and purifying it. The base substance broken down until it becomes pure. This only works in a safe way. This only works in a good way. This only elevates our experience if we are coming from this place of strength, if we are coming from this place of innocence and stillness and gentleness around our desires, if we are wrapping our arms and our chain of roses around the wild beasts that live inside us and saying, I got you, I'm with you. Then when we turn to this next step, this next phase in the evolution that is that major arcana in the tarot, we're able to do it from this place of, I am fully aware that I have places where I don't hold with such gentleness, where I clamp down, where I constrict, where my desire has become corrupted and it's resulting in behaviors that are not necessarily serving me or my body or the world. This is no joke. This is kind of serious stuff, right? We're talking about your desire, we're talking about your sexuality, we're talking about addiction, we're talking about temptation, we're talking about obsession. Hey August, hey August, how you doing? It can sound really intense, and I think it will be actually on some level. I think there's going to be these conversations around bodies, these conversations around sexuality, these conversations around where that has been healthy and enlivening and taken the beautiful mystical practices of awareness around how your sexual energy and your spiritual energy are not different. There are two streams in the river that are meant to find each other, meant to enliven each other. Michael Singer talks about this, that within us we are connected to pure potential, to core energy. And when we feel this exhaustion, this fatigue in our lives, it's not because we have burned out our energy, it's because we are disconnected from our energy. So in a lot of the mystical teachings, particularly Tantra, but also in the Gnostic teachings, it's important to understand that this is why, and you can think about it in churches where celibacy becomes a conversation. This conversation around your sexual energy and what it does for you is pretty key. It's pretty key. And this is how we rise up, how that stream of cosmic energy coming from the magician's crown meets the stream of energy coming up from the root, coming up from the earth, and how those two meet and marry and expand your heart, man, expand your heart. And this is why you're here. That is ecstatic. That is ecstatic. And that is part of the opportunity for August. What I will say about this honeypot temptation, sexual playground that is August energy. God, I made that sound probably more kinkier than it will be, but let me know how this shows up in your life. There's a lot of beauty around this, a lot of passion and intrigue and connection, and I wouldn't be surprised if, I know Venus is in retrograde, but this energy feels to me like finding someone who really turns you on, or finding a way that life really turns you on, or finding a project that really turns you on. And you may be handling that in a new way. Part of what you've gone through, especially in July, right? But this whole process of living, but especially in this last July, and I talked about in the last weekly podcast, was you don't always realize how you've changed until you sit yourself in old places. We talked about this when I used to study with John Wineland and Kendra Kuna. You do all these practice around embodied living, around your sexuality, around relationships, and you like talk all the talk and you do all the work and the process on yourself. And then you go show up in a relationship. And man, you're like, wow. I could talk about these things. I can analyze these things. I can bring awareness to these things. But when my nervous system, my body, my lion enters the ring, all bets are off. And so there's a reason why in those practices, in those tantric embodiment practices, you practice. Because you're like instilling in your nervous system, okay, here you go. A reminder, test course, test run. Because when you show up in relationship, it's like a whole new game. It's the lion has been let loose, and who knows what could happen. But this idea of that you don't really know how you've changed until you put yourself in old places and old roles and old seats. And then you look around, you're like, wow, this is not what it was. I am not who I was. That is very much happening in August. There's a lot of sweetness. There's a lot of truth. There's a lot of connection. There's a lot of destiny. It feels like destiny in this energy. There's a lot of sensuality around this. And two things I want to say to you. One, no. The word no feels really important in August. And I don't know what that means, and I don't know how that shows up in your life, but I'm just going to say it out loud. That idea of no is a full sentence is going to show up and matter to you in August. It's going to be helpful for you to remember that. Write that shit down. It's going to be helpful for you to remember that. No is going to be something you want to exercise. There's going to be temptation. There's going to be messaging around filling up empty spaces. So I want you just to sit for a moment with this idea of what does it feel like in my life when I have empty space. There was something, I was working with it, I was processing it, I was dealing with it, and it released. Our relationship ended. You changed spaces, you changed jobs, a friendship evolved, your role as a parent shifted. You completed work as an artist, right? And you finished that body of work. Now there's an empty space. What do you do with that? Nature abhors a vacuum. We know that, right? And sometimes we have to like consciously work to not fill the space. So I just want you to have that awareness this month. I think that's going to come up for a lot of people. There's going to be this, I want you to picture like the bubble you create with that into that empty space to say, I'm going to fill it with my energy. I'm going to push my essence, my energy out into that space. And I'm just going to hold for a moment. I'm going to pause for a moment. I'm going to say no for a moment. And just sit with that. Wait. Be patient. There's going to be this energy that like things want to roll into those empty spaces, roll into the empty space that you have generated or created in your own life. I would encourage you, the devil in particular would encourage you to not let those spaces just get, rolled into. It's the best way I can say it. So just feel into your life. Where are the empty spaces? And what would it be like if you just pause like one more minute with the emptiness? One more breath. There's going to be a lot of things kind of knocking on the door, inviting themselves in. And I just wonder, and I can feel that there's something to that. Years ago, I did something called a masculine cleanse, which is when it's also a practice that both Kendra Kunav and John Wineland talk about a lot in their work. I did a masculine cleanse, and the idea was to remove myself from all connections that fed validation with men. And I remember, I think it was Kendra, I don't even remember who it was. One of them was like, you should do this thing for 6 months. And I was like, I'll do 3 months. I can do 3 months. Like no talking, no flirting, no nothing. And so I did. And then, so it was like March. So I was like, okay, I guess I'll go 6 months. And by the time I got to 6 months, I was like, actually, I need to go a year. And I ended up going over a year without like talking to anyone. And it was a good time in my life to do that. But there was something about this idea of, I didn't realize how much I needed empty space until I had it, until I had soaked in it, until I had sat in it much longer than was comfortable. And then once I did, I was like, oh, I see all the ways I've kept myself busy. I see all the ways I've filled the space in a desire to feel connected, to feel loved, to feel valued, to anything, like 1,000 things. But there was all of a sudden room for me to feel myself. And I can say not sure I'd ever quite experienced that as a woman. And it changed everything for me. And now I'm very good about offering myself space to be, and I can still feel the pressure to fill the space, fill the room. So it's a lot of personal tea from Kirsten. But it's true, there's something about this idea of you create these spaces, and it's almost like, I know the universe doesn't test us, but it's almost like a test from the universe. Like, oh, you have this empty space, let me fill it. And it can fill it with kind of these like subpar choices, like dating's an obvious example, right? These kind of like half-hearted choices. And you're like, okay. And it's like, no. I'm going to keep this space clear until I'm really aligned, until I'm really inspired, until this is really right for me. So it's just something to think about, this idea of the empty room, the empty spaces, and this idea of no. Those feel just really key and really important to whatever's happening in August. On top of this idea of dealing with, opening to, becoming aware of, enjoying your body. Your body's desires, your body's longings, what it's calling you for. And any work that needs to happen around making those desires, taking the purity of those desires and kind of boiling away anything that might corrupt it, anything that might shame it, anything that might wrap it in conceit. Yeah, the last thing I'll say, this is kind of a funny analogy, but it really was interesting when I started thinking about it. Desire is this force in our bodies and in the universe. And I was reading something and it said, it wasn't talking about desire, but it was talking about energy, the way that in quantum physics they talk about how, I think it's an atom can appear like a particle or a wave depending on how it's being expressed or depending on the environment. Something like that, like how do you smooth out the edges of your desire so that it moves through your body and through your life with pleasure, with ease, with openness, with integrity, with spaciousness, and with love, instead of feeling like you have to clamp down, get it met, get tight with your desire. There's something about getting loose and wavy with your desire and allowing that to become a process of purification versus getting really tight with your desire and kind of getting it all tangled up in kind of negative, more shameful, more judgmental emotions that put color and stalk on it that it doesn't deserve. I think that's it. August is going to be fascinating. It sounds like it's going to be a really sexy month. It sounds like you're going to come up against some addictive qualities or thoughts or energies, and you're coming up against them in a way that actually is teaching you how you want to live without them. So it feels like a really positive thing. The devil in this energy feels like a great liberation and a great sense of freedom and a great sense of getting to know your body as the spiritual gift it is, getting to know your incarnation as the mystical spiritual experience that it's meant to be. Like you're an alien here among us. I don't know, maybe you're not, but maybe you are. Maybe you are. Maybe you are an ancient being who has traveled all across the universe in all kinds of dimensions, and you've chosen to be here now, and the gift you have on arrival is this body, is this sensitivity, is this beautiful, hungry lion of your desires. It's pretty cool, man. So that is going to come home to roost in August. There's going to be a deeper awareness. I am for sure feeling that in my life. I feel grateful to be in my body, to be incarnate in a way that I've never experienced before. And I am deeply, deeply, deeply grateful for it. I can tell you that in my experience of it, there is just so much freaking joy, so much joy and gratitude, and I'm here for it. So that's my tea, my friends. I hope that's helpful. I hope I gave you something to work with. And what you want, what you desire, it's just the core of it, the base of it, the need underneath it. It's just truth. It's just truth moving its way through your system. Clarify that shit. Make it something you want to work with. Make it something that serves you and the world, that makes the world a more joyful, more bountiful, more creative, more artistic, more light-filled, love-filled place. I'm going to pull some cards for every sign, and I think I'm actually going to post that as a separate podcast. And so you'll see a little readings podcast that will come up around the same time as this. We'll have the signs in one, and we'll have this little chatty chat in this one. I also did my first Healer Salon, which is my interview series, and I did it with Nina, and I'm going to post that in middle of August. I'm really excited about that. My goal with that is to really demystify this role of teacher and healer and help us feel each other's humanity, and in that help you believe in your own teacher, your own healer more fully. So Nina and I had a lovely conversation. I can't wait to share with you. I love you. If you like this podcast, if it's working for you, please share it. Please do whatever you can do to rate it or rank it or comment on it. I don't know how any of this stuff works, but I will tell you that I know it matters how you interact with this, and I love being here with you. So if it's serving you at all, please help me keep it going. And I love you so much. Happy August, happy sexy summer, and I will check you later. Bye. It's giving everything is sacred. It's giving art. It's giving light you up and turn you on and set you free. It's giving curiosity. It's giving freedom. It's giving love. It's giving you are more magical and powerful than you can comprehend. It's giving, I don't know what's happening, but I am so here for it. It's giving you are pure potential. It's giving mystical.